So, what is it that makes you you? It's got to be one of the biggest questions we can ever ask, right? In this explainer, we are going to try and assemble that very puzzle, the personality puzzle. We're going to look at what personality actually is. We'll explore the major theories that try to explain it all, and we'll even see how psychologists attempt to measure it. Let's dive in. It all really boils down to this one simple, but honestly pretty profound question. Have you ever been in a situation with a friend, experienced the exact same thing, but you both reacted in completely different ways? One of you is calm, the other is freaking out. What's behind that? Well, the short answer is personality. Okay, so what are we really talking about when we say personality? Well, psychologists define it as these unique, and this is key, relatively stable patterns in how we behave, think, and feel. So it's not about what mood you're in just for today. It's about those consistent threads that run through your life and make you who you are over time. All right, our first major stop on this journey takes us deep inside the mind. We're talking about maybe the most famous and, yeah, controversial approach out there, the psychoanalytic perspective, which was pioneered by none other than Sigmund Freud. His big idea? To understand personality, you can't just look at the surface. You have to go deep. This right here is such a great way to visualize Freud's concept of the mind. He compared it to an iceberg. That little tip that you see sticking out of the water, that's your conscious mind. It's everything you're aware of right this second. Just below the surface is the preconscious, stuff you could remember if you tried. But that massive hidden part underwater, that's the unconscious. Freud believed this was a huge storeroom of deep desires, powerful motives, and buried memories that we have no idea are even there, but that secretly drive almost everything we do. So inside this mind of ours, Freud imagined this constant epic battle between three key players. First, you've got the id. Think of it like a demanding toddler. It's the primitive part we're born with, and it runs on the pleasure principle. It wants what it wants, and it wants it now. Then you have the superego. This is your inner parent or your moral compass telling you, nope, that's not right, based on all the rules of society. And who's stuck in the middle playing referee? That's the ego. Its job is to listen to both sides and find a realistic compromise that works in the real world. Now, Freud's ideas were absolutely groundbreaking, but not everyone was totally on board. In fact, some of his own followers, who we call the neo-Freudians, started to go their own way. For instance, Alfred Adler thought the focus shouldn't be on primal urges, but on social ones. He argued that we're all driven to overcome this basic feeling of inferiority we have from childhood. And then there's Carl Jung, who took things even deeper, suggesting we all tap into a collective unconscious, like a shared inherited memory bank for all of humanity, full of universal symbols he called archetypes. Okay, let's hit pause and do a complete 180. The next section looks at two theories that are basically polar opposites. One argues that we are products of our environment, shaped from the outside in, and the other claims we're all driven by an internal need to grow, from the inside out. Wow, that is a bold statement from John B. Watson, one of the founders of the behaviorist approach. See, behaviorists just threw out the whole idea of a hidden inner world. For them, personality isn't something you have, it's something you learn. They saw it as just a bundle of behaviors that have been shaped over the years by rewards and punishments from the world around us. And standing in complete opposition to that are the humanists. This image here perfectly captures Abraham Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs. Humanists believed we're not just puppets of our environment. No, we are active beings driven by this powerful inner force to grow and become the best version of ourselves. The ultimate goal for them is to climb all the way to the top of this pyramid and reach what's called self-actualization, where we realize our absolute fullest potential. Another really important humanist, Carl Rogers, was all about the idea of the self. He suggested that we all have two versions of ourselves living inside us. There's the real self, that's who you genuinely are, warts and all, and then there's the ideal self, that's the person you wish you could be. According to Rogers, the key to happiness is bringing those two selves closer together, achieving what he called congruence. So we've looked at hidden drives and outside forces, but what if personality is actually more like a blueprint? This brings us to our third major perspective, trait theory. This approach is all about identifying and measuring the core building blocks that make up who we are. The whole idea here is pretty straightforward. What if our personalities are simply built from a unique mix of these things called traits? Consistent characteristics like being outgoing or anxious or conscientious. The goal for trait theorists, then, is to figure out what those fundamental building blocks are and how we can actually measure them.
Gordon Allport, who was a real pioneer in this area, came up with a kind of hierarchy for traits. At the very top, you have what he called cardinal traits. These are super rare. It's when one single trait basically defines a person's entire life. Think of Mother Teresa's altruism. Much more common are central traits. These are the main 5 to 10 words you might use to describe a friend, like funny, kind, or reliable. And at the bottom are secondary traits, which are attitudes or preferences that only show up in specific situations. Like maybe you get anxious when you have to speak in public. So today, the model that's most widely accepted by psychologists is known as the Big Five. The idea is that the huge complexity of human personality can be broken down into 5 core dimensions. You can remember them with the acronym OCEAN. O is for openness, how curious and creative are you? C is for conscientiousness, are you super organized or more spontaneous? E is for extroversion, do you get your energy from being around other people? A is for agreeableness, how cooperative and warm are you? And finally, N is for neuroticism, which is really about emotional stability. And the important thing to remember is it's not like you're either one or the other. We all fall somewhere on a spectrum for each of these 5 traits.
But of course, Western psychology isn't the only game in town. It's really fascinating to look at other cultural views, like the ancient Indian approach that's based on the 3 gunas. This framework suggests our personality is shaped by the balance of 3 core qualities. There's sattva, which is all about goodness, stability, and caring. Then there's rajas, which represents energy, action, and passion. And finally, tamas, which is about inertia and ignorance. A person's dominant guna is said to really shape their whole personality type.
Okay, so with all these different theories flying around, how do psychologists actually try to get a handle on someone's personality? Well, that brings us to the final piece of our puzzle, assessment. Generally speaking, there are 2 main ways they go about it. On one hand, you have what are called paper and pencil or self-report tests. These are your classic questionnaires where you answer questions about yourself. They're structured and pretty objective. But on the other hand, you have projective techniques like the famous Rorschach ink blot test. The idea there is that when you look at a meaningless blob of ink and say what you see, you're actually projecting your hidden unconscious thoughts and feelings onto it. So after all that, which theory is the right one? Well, the truth is, there is no single correct theory. Each one of these lenses, the psychoanalytic, the behavioral, the humanistic, and the trait approach, each one gives us a valuable and unique piece of this incredibly complicated puzzle that is human personality. They all have something to teach us. And that really leaves us with one final thought for you to chew on. If you could take a personality test and have it reveal just one thing about your inner world, what would you want to know? That desire to understand ourselves, that's really what keeps the study of personalities so endlessly fascinating.